Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. All right, very quickly, we got to talk about the other side of things. That's the Colorado side. And listen, I am somebody who I have been a defender of Coach Prime. I still, in like a weird way, believe in Coach Prime. But let's also call a spade, and let's just be honest. It is getting harder and harder to defend this team, harder and harder to justify this team, harder and harder to talk yourself into being as good as we thought they were going to be in the preseason. And so let's dive into Colorado. Let's dive into the other side of this stuff because, as I just said, I want to believe in Colorado. I've hoped that this season would be better, that this season would be different. I talked about all offseason the fact that when you go from 1 win to 4, that is a step up. But after you see this game, it's hard to have any positivity about Colorado, and you just wonder, what is the ceiling for this team? Because whatever it is, I think it's a lot lower than maybe even I thought a few weeks ago. In terms of this game, listen, after the North Dakota State game, what I said, and I still sort of believe it, I said there was a positive and a negative coming out of that North Dakota State game. And the negative that I said that O-line ain't fixed. That O-line ain't good enough. And even if you just watch the North Dakota State game, you could see pretty clearly. You sat there and you said, you know what? This team does not look better than it did a year ago. This team is not blocking significantly better than a year ago. And oh, by the way, there were 2 times in that North Dakota State game that they needed a 1-yard run and could not get them. And you sat there and said, well, wait a second now. If you can't get 1 yard against North Dakota State, what are you going to do when you face a much better defensive line full of a bunch of FBS Power 5, Power 4 conference guys? Well, we found out Saturday, and it wasn't pretty. As I mentioned a minute ago, Colorado finishes this game with a total of 16 yards rushing on 22 attempts. Now, again, we talked about it in the Nebraska side of things. This is a stat that's a little bit skewed. Obviously, sack losses count towards your rushing total. But at the end of the day, your leading rusher had 32 yards. That is not going to get a job done. That's not good enough. And I'm sorry. Shedeur got sacked 6 times. And the one thing we could criticize Colorado for whatever, Shedeur gets rid of the football. This is not a guy that holds onto the ball forever. And he gets sacked 6 times, 10 tackles for loss. This offensive line just isn't good enough. And I don't have the answers. I'm not a coach. I'm not compensated to figure out blocking schemes and whatever. But whatever it is, you looked at this offensive line on paper. You said it should be better. I know Jordan Seaton's a freshman. I know that whatever. But Khalil Benson was a 4-year starter, multi-year starter in the Big Ten. Jordan Seaton was a 5-star. You had other guys coming from Power 5 conferences, and you hoped that it got figured out. It has not. The defense, it's hard for me to really gauge with the defense because bluntly, I'll just be honest, thought they completely showed up unprepared. That first drive, Nebraska runs the ball right down your throat. I'm sorry, that's unacceptable. Same time, you could also look at it and say Nebraska only scored 28 points. Now, again, they let their foot off the gas. They weren't really trying to run up the score, but Shedeur did throw a pick 6. And beyond that, there was that weird play, probably inside the 30, inside the goal line that got tipped up in the air. Easily could have been an interception for Colorado. And so with the defense, I'm not quite as down as everybody else, but I also got to admit, Nebraska kind of took their foot off the gas, and that is a large part of, frankly, why the score was, quote-unquote, only 28-10, because I think they could have scored more if they wanted to. The defense, to me, is improved, but not nearly enough, and probably not nearly as much as I thought. And so when I look at this whole thing in the big picture, I do think there's some positives, do think there's some negatives about Colorado. Going to try to be glasses half full and say this. The one thing you can say about Colorado, I don't think that outside of Utah, they are going to play a better team in terms of line play and physicality. Matt Rule has talked about from day one. He's a Penn State guy, Big Ten guy. He is a guy who builds his programs from the inside out. And so when I look at the Colorado schedule, there are challenges. There are games where they will be underdogs. But outside of Utah, I don't see a team that's going to be as tough and as mean and as physical as Nebraska. So if that's your kryptonite, it's kind of good. The schedule breaks kind of nicely. And I'll take it a step further. Big 12, excuse me, not Big 10. Big 10 is great. Big 12 was pretty underwhelming in week 2. Arizona, what a weird team that was. They couldn't be stopped on offense. They couldn't stop anyone on defense in week 1. Week 2, the offense didn't really get going and the defense carried them. Don't know what they're about. Easily could have lost to Northern Arizona. The opposite is true as well. The team that Arizona is playing on Friday night, Kansas State, looked terrible against Tulane. I don't buy them at all. I've never bought into Avery Johnson. I think people love him because he's got long hair. I don't really care. Guy's like a 52% completion percentage guy. You can't win in college football with a guy like that. So I have questions about Kansas State. Kansas lost to Illinois. Oklahoma State should have lost to Arkansas. So you've got a little bit of hope. But at some point, it can't just be hope. You actually have to capitalize and take advantage of what is on the field. And so when I look at this team, it's just hard for me to get excited because you see all the individual pieces. You see that they should be better than they are, but they just haven't proven it yet right now in college football. They just haven't proven it yet. I get it. They started 4-2 last year. We were all excited about it. But they finished 0-8 last year, or I guess it would have been 0-6 last year. They're 1-1 this year. They struggled against North Dakota State. And again, I look at the offensive line should be better. It isn't. The defensive line is better, but is it going to be good enough? The secondary should be better. We'll see, whatever. But I want to quote Coach Prime. I know Coach Prime believes, I want to believe. And I think the schedule is still there to get things figured out. Now, if you're looking for a positive, this was kind of surprising to me. Colorado is actually like an 8-point favorite this weekend at Colorado State. No, Colorado State got beat up good against Texas 2 weeks ago. Texas, as I just said, might be the best team in college football. So that's a little bit surprising to me. But if you look at that, Colorado State is a game you should win. Central Florida is going to be an interesting one. You got to fly across country. There's obviously going to be a climate change, and you could look at the UCF game as a positive or a negative after that. Or you play Baylor, that's a game you got to win. You're at home. Baylor, I don't believe is very good. You have to win that game. You get to 3-1, all of a sudden, people start saying, you know what? Maybe this team isn't as bad as we thought. The Central Florida game I just mentioned, the end of September, that's an interesting game from this perspective, is because Central Florida is coming off a bye in that game, but they are also playing at Florida the week after. So they'll be rested. But the counter to that is kind of like, you know what? They might be looking ahead to Florida. So I could go on, but as I keep saying, I don't think this team is as bad as they looked on Saturday against Nebraska. But at some point, whoever it is, me, anyone in the media, the coaching staff, Coach Prime. Like one thing I'll say really quick, because I know I'm going long here, I want to get to some other stuff. One thing I give Coach Prime credit for, like he owned it in the locker room. Like he has not given up on this team. I watched some of the stuff that his son put out on Well Off Media's social media page. And it's like Coach Prime is just saying, we got to get better. We got to figure this out. We can't keep making the same mistakes. We can't keep beating ourselves. So I don't know what else there is to say. I want to believe. I like Coach Prime. I believe in his mission. I believe he wants to help young men. I believe he's in it for the right reasons. But at the end of the day, this is a sport and a career defined by wins and losses. And Colorado's taken just too many of them